He gave his shoes to the barefoot alien girl. That night, she slipped into his bed. The metallic chill of Nexus Station's deck plating bit through Jack Sterling's dress shoes as he navigated the diplomatic reception. But he'd endured worse discomfort for the sake of peace. Around him, representatives from a dozen worlds mingled in carefully orchestrated neutrality. Their conversations a symphony of translated politeness, masking centuries of mistrust. The Zephyrian delegation commanded attention in the center of the vast observation lounge, their purple-hued skin catching the light from the nebula outside like living amethyst. Jack paused mid-conversation with the Altarian trade minister, his diplomatic smile freezing as movement caught his peripheral vision. Near the refreshment alcove, a Zephyrian woman moved with fluid grace despite an obvious limp, her bare feet silent against the unforgiving metal floor. Unlike the other Zephyrians draped in ceremonial robes, she wore simple servant's attire that did nothing to diminish her striking beauty. Her midnight hair fell in waves past her shoulders, framing features that belonged in classical sculpture rather than scrubbing floors. "Excuse me," Jack murmured to the Altarian, his attention wholly captured by the woman's subtle wince as she stepped on a particularly cold section of deck plating. She carried herself with unconscious dignity despite her menial tasks, her movements economical and precise. Jack watched her navigate between clusters of dignitaries, invisible to their important conversations, yet somehow commanding his complete focus. When she bent to retrieve a dropped napkin, he noticed the way her toes curled against the frigid metal, seeking warmth that wouldn't come. The Zephyrian delegation paid her no attention, treating her presence as background noise to their heated discussions with Ambassador Helena Cross. Jack recognized the tension crackling between the species representatives. 3 months of negotiations had yielded little progress, and time was running short before the Zephyrian Empire decided whether humanity deserved partnership or conquest. "Ambassador Sterling," Dylan Park appeared at his elbow, tablet in hand. "The morning session's preliminary reports." "Later," Jack said, already moving toward the Zephyrian woman. His aide's confused expression barely registered as he crossed the polished floor with determined strides. She was refilling water carafes when he approached, her movements careful and deliberate. Up close, her alien beauty struck him like a physical blow. Her skin held an opalescent quality that shifted between deep purple and violet depending on the angle of light. High cheekbones and full lips spoke of aristocratic breeding despite her humble clothing. And when she glanced up at his approach, her eyes were the color of starlight. "You're cold," he said, the observation falling between them like a confession. She straightened slowly, surprise flickering across her features. Her gaze dropped to his polished leather shoes, then back to his face with calculating intelligence that seemed at odds with her servant's role. "I manage," she replied, her accented English precise and melodic. "Your concern is unexpected." Around them, conversations continued their diplomatic dance, but Jack felt the weight of watching eyes. Ambassador Cross shot him a warning glare from across the room. The Zephyrian military attachés had gone silent, their attention shifting toward this unprecedented interaction between a human diplomat and their servant. Jack knelt, ignoring the gas and muttered protests from nearby delegates. His fingers worked at his shoelaces with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from a childhood spent helping his younger sister prepare for school. The leather was warm from his body heat, molded to his feet from months of diplomatic meetings and endless station corridors. "Ambassador Sterling, what are you doing?" Helena Cross's sharp voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. He stood, shoes in hand, and met the Zephyrian woman's stunned gaze, her lips parted slightly, breath catching in a way that sent heat coursing through his veins despite the station's environmental controls. "Something that should have been done hours ago," he said, extending the shoes toward her. "Please." She stared at the offered footwear as if he'd presented her with crown jewels. Her slender fingers trembled slightly as she reached for them. And when their skin brushed during the exchange, electricity arced between them. The touch lasted a heartbeat longer than necessary, her warmth seeping into his consciousness like a drug. "I cannot," she began. "You can," he said quietly, holding her gaze. "You should." The reception had fallen silent around them. 100 alien faces turned toward this moment of human spontaneity that shattered diplomatic protocol. Jack felt the cold deck plating through his socks but ignored the discomfort, focused entirely on the woman before him. She sat gracefully on a nearby chair and slipped her feet into his shoes. They were too large, but she cinched the laces tight, her movements deliberate and somehow sensual. When she stood, testing her balance, a small smile curved her lips, the first genuine expression he'd seen from any Zephyrian since negotiations began. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying undertones that made his pulse quicken. Your kindness will not be forgotten. The spell broke as Ambassador Cross approached, her face flushed with diplomatic fury. The Zephyrian delegation had resumed their conversations, but Jack caught several stealing glances at their servant, now walking with confident strides in human footwear. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of damage control and whispered rebukes. Jack endured Cross's lecture about appropriate conduct while his attention drifted repeatedly to the Zephyrian woman, now moving through her duties with fluid grace. She caught him watching several times, her starlight eyes holding his with promise and mystery. Hours later, Jack sat in his quarters reviewing treaty proposals, his stockinged feet propped on the desk. The station's night cycle had dimmed the corridors, leaving him alone with the soft hum of life support systems and the distant pulse of the nebula outside his viewport. The door chime surprised him from his reverie. "Come in," he called, expecting Dylan with late reports or Cross with another lecture about diplomatic propriety. The door slid open to reveal the Zephyrian woman, still wearing his shoes. She stepped inside, allowing the portal to close behind her, and in the intimate lighting of his quarters, her alien beauty took his breath away. Her servant's clothing had been replaced by a flowing garment that highlighted every curve, the fabric seeming to absorb and reflect light like captured starfire. "You gave me your shoes," she said, moving closer with predatory grace. "Now I find myself wondering what else you might be willing to give." Jack's breath caught as she approached, his mind racing between diplomatic protocol and primal attraction. The door had sealed behind her with finality, leaving them alone in the intimate space of his quarters. Her movements held a confidence that contradicted her servant's facade, each step deliberate and mesmerizing. "I don't even know your name," he said, rising from his desk. The distance between them felt charged with possibility and danger. "Names have power," she replied, stopping just beyond arm's reach. Her starlight eyes studied his face with unsettling intensity. "Perhaps we should discover other things first." She lifted one foot, displaying his leather shoe on her delicate arch. The sight of his footwear on her alien form struck him as unexpectedly intimate, more personal than if she'd worn nothing at all. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Risk diplomatic embarrassment for a stranger?" Jack stepped closer, drawn by the warmth radiating from her purple-hued skin. "You were in pain." "That matters more than politics." Something flickered in her expression, surprise, perhaps even vulnerability. Her fingers traced the edge of his desk, and he noticed how her touch lingered on the surface as if memorizing textures. "Your species fascinates me," she murmured. "Such capacity for spontaneous compassion. My people, we calculate everything. Emotion is weakness to be controlled." "Is that why you're here?" Jack asked. "To study human weakness?" She moved closer, her presence overwhelming his senses. The fabric of her garment seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight, revealing glimpses of curves that made his pulse thunder. When she reached out to touch his chest, her palm burned through his shirt. "I came to understand," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But understanding requires deeper contact." Her lips met his with surprising softness, the kiss tentative at first, then growing in intensity as he responded. Her skin held an otherworldly warmth, and when her tongue brushed his, he tasted something like cinnamon and starfire. Jack's arms encircled her waist, pulling her against him, feeling the alien contours of her body through the flowing fabric. She broke the kiss, breathing hard. "Your heart races," she observed, her palm still pressed to his chest. "Fear or desire?" "Both," he admitted, his hands tracing the graceful lines of her shoulders. Her laugh was like crystalline music. "Honesty, another human trait my people find perplexing." The intercom's sharp chime shattered the moment. Dylan's voice crackled through the comm system, tense with urgency. "Ambassador, we have a situation. There's been an incident in the Zephyrian quarters." Jack reluctantly stepped back, his diplomatic instincts overriding desire. The woman watched him with calculating eyes as he activated the response. "What kind of incident?" he asked. "Sabotage, sir. Someone breached their environmental controls. 3 Zephyrians are in critical condition." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Jack saw the alien woman's expression shift, her earlier softness replaced by sharp focus. She moved toward the door with fluid urgency. "I must go," she said, but Jack caught her arm gently. "Wait. This could be connected to the negotiations. If someone's trying to derail the peace talks, then they've succeeded," she said, her voice carrying new authority that belied her servant status. "My people will see this as proof of human treachery." She pulled free from his grasp and headed for the door, then paused at the threshold. "Thank you for the shoes, Ambassador Sterling." and for showing me something I didn't expect to find. The door closed behind her, leaving Jack alone with questions multiplying like viral code. He dressed quickly, pulling on spare boots, his mind analyzing the evening's events. Her behavior, her knowledge of human diplomatic protocols, the way she'd spoken of her people with insiders' understanding, none of it aligned with the servant's position. The Zephyrian quarters buzzed with activity when he arrived. Medical teams worked frantically while purple-skinned officials clustered in heated discussions. Jack spotted General Thane Korax near the damaged environmental console, his expression thunderous. "Ambassador," Korax's voice carried barely controlled fury. "Your species shows their true nature at last." "General, we had nothing to do with this," Jack said firmly. "The Earth delegation condemns this attack completely." "Convenient words," Korax snarled, "but actions reveal truth. First your people refuse our territorial concessions. Now they resort to assassination." Ambassador Cross appeared at Jack's shoulder, her face pale with diplomatic crisis. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," she murmured. "3 more Zephyrian delegations are threatening to withdraw." Jack scanned the crowd, looking for the mysterious woman, but she was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he noticed security footage displays showing shadowy figures moving through maintenance corridors. The saboteurs had been careful to avoid identification, but their human silhouettes were unmistakable. "We need to find who did this," Jack said, "before they accomplish their real goal." "Which is?" Cross asked. "Ending these negotiations permanently." The next several hours passed in a blur of emergency sessions and damage control. Jack found himself mediating between increasingly hostile factions while trying to identify the saboteurs. The evidence pointed to a radical human faction opposed to alien integration, but something about the attack felt orchestrated, too convenient. During a brief recess, he caught sight of the Zephyrian woman in the medical bay, no longer dressed as a servant. She wore the deep blue robes of a mid-level official, moving between the injured with practiced authority. When their eyes met across the crowded space, she gave the slightest shake of her head, a warning. The peace talks resumed under heavy security, but the damage was done. Trust between species had evaporated like atmosphere through a hull breach. Jack watched the Zephyrian delegation with new understanding, seeing how they deferred to several officials he'd initially dismissed as minor functionaries. As the session devolved into accusations and counter-accusations, Jack realized the woman had been testing him from the beginning. His act of kindness hadn't been spontaneous charity to a servant. It had been an evaluation by someone with real authority to judge humanity's worthiness. The question was whether he'd passed or failed, and what that meant for both their species' survival. Jack found her in the observation deck's shadows an hour before dawn shift, her silhouette outlined against the swirling nebula beyond the viewport. She'd changed again, this time into form-fitting tactical gear that emphasized her warrior's grace. His leather shoes looked incongruous against the military precision of her outfit. "You've been looking for me," she said without turning. Her reflection in the transparent steel showed eyes heavy with exhaustion and something deeper, conflict. "The medical bay footage shows you giving orders to senior physicians," Jack said, approaching carefully. "Servants don't command Zephyrian medical staff." She turned then, and he saw the weight of deception etched in the lines of her face. "No, they don't." "So who are you really?" Her hand moved to a concealed weapon at her hip, an instinctive response that told him everything about her true training. "My name is Zara Voss. I was the chief strategic analyst for the Zephyrian Military Council." The revelation hit him like decompression, stealing his breath. "You're their top strategist. You've been evaluating us from the beginning." "Evaluating whether your species deserves to exist," she said with brutal honesty. "The Empire sent me to determine if humanity possesses genuine compassion or merely performs calculated kindness for political gain." Jack's mind raced through the implications. Every moment between them had been choreographed, every touch a test. "And your conclusion?" "Was decided the moment you knelt before a room full of dignitaries to give your shoes to a stranger," she said, her voice softening. No species capable of such spontaneous empathy could be the monsters our intelligence suggested. The station's alert klaxons suddenly shrieked to life, red emergency lighting bathing the observation deck in crimson. Administrator Quinn Morix's voice echoed through the comm system. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have incoming vessels of unknown configuration. Repeat, unknown vessels approaching at high velocity." Jack's diplomatic training kicked in as he activated his personal communicator. "Dylan, report." "Ambassador, sensors show 12 ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're not broadcasting identification codes, and their weapon signatures are... Sir, they're targeting the station's reactor core." Zara moved to the nearest terminal, her fingers flying over alien controls with practiced efficiency. Jack watched her access restricted Zephyrian military channels, her authority codes bypassing security protocols he didn't know existed. Korathi raiders, she said, her face pale with recognition. A splinter faction that broke from the Empire 3 cycles ago. They oppose any peace with humanity. Why attack now? Jack asked, though part of him already knew. Because someone told them about these negotiations, Zara replied grimly. Someone who wants both our species to suffer. The station shuddered under weapons fire, artificial gravity fluctuating as power systems struggled to compensate. Through the viewport, Jack could see sleek, predatory shapes weaving between the station's defensive turrets, their hulls gleaming like polished bone. We need to evacuate the diplomatic wings, he said, already moving toward the exit. Zara caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Jack, there's something else. The attack on our quarters last night. It wasn't human saboteurs. What do you mean? The environmental breach was caused by Korathi infiltrators. They've been on this station for days, waiting for the right moment to destabilize the talks. Another massive impact sent them stumbling. Emergency bulkheads began sealing throughout the station as sections lost atmosphere to weapon damage. Jack could hear the distant sounds of combat echoing through the corridors. The human radicals were a convenient scapegoat, Zara continued. The Korathi knew suspicion would fall on your people, ensuring the negotiations would collapse before any alliance could form. An alliance that would make both our species stronger, Jack realized. Too strong for pirates and raiders to prey upon. Exactly. Zara's communicator buzzed with rapid Zephyrian battle language. Her expression grew darker as she listened. General Korax is mobilizing the military escort. He's going to engage the raiders directly. That's suicide. 12 ships against the station's defenses and 3 Zephyrian cruisers. Korax believes in honorable death over strategic retreat, she said, frustration bleeding through her controlled demeanor. If he dies here, the military council will blame humanity for his loss. The war faction will use his death to justify planetary bombardment of Earth colonies. The implications crystallize with terrifying clarity. Jack grabbed her shoulders, feeling the tension in her muscles. Can you stop him? My authority was revoked when I was assigned to this mission, she said. Officially, I'm just an intelligence analyst gathering data. But unofficially, her smile held razor edges. Unofficially, most of the military council still listens when I speak, but accessing command protocols from here. She trailed off, studying his face intently. I would need help from someone with diplomatic clearance codes. What kind of help? The kind that could be considered treason if we're wrong, she said quietly. I need access to the station's primary communication array. From there, I can coordinate a joint defense that might actually succeed. Another explosion rocked the station. Jack could smell smoke and the sharp tang of electrical fires. In the distance, he heard human voices shouting evacuation orders. You're asking me to trust you completely, he said, after discovering everything between us was orchestrated. Zara stepped closer, her hand rising to touch his cheek. Her skin was fevered, alien biochemistry responding to stress in ways that made her glow faintly in the emergency lighting. Not everything was orchestrated, she said, her voice barely audible over the chaos around them. My mission was to evaluate human nature. What I didn't expect was for that evaluation to change my own. Her lips found his in a kiss desperate with urgency and regret. When they broke apart, her starlight eyes held depths of emotion that no amount of military training could have fabricated. Help me save both our people, she whispered. And maybe we can find something real in all these lies. Jack made his decision the way he'd made every important choice in his diplomatic career, with his heart rather than his head. He activated his emergency codes, overriding security protocols that would grant them access to the station's most sensitive systems. Lead the way, Chief Strategic Analyst, he said. Time to show these raiders what happens when humans and Zephyrians work together. The station's command center had become a war room, holographic displays showing the tactical nightmare unfolding around Nexus Station. Jack's diplomatic credentials opened doors that should have remained sealed, while Zara's fingers danced across Zephyrian military interfaces with deadly precision. Korax is moving his cruisers into attack formation, she said, her voice tight with concentration. He's going to charge straight into their crossfire. Jack watched the tactical display with growing horror. The Korathi raiders had positioned themselves expertly, using the station's bulk as a shield while picking off defensive turrets with surgical strikes. General Korax's 3 cruisers were vastly outgunned, their honor-bound approach playing directly into enemy hands. Can you raise him directly? Jack asked. He won't listen, Zara replied, her hands never pausing in their work. not to a disgraced analyst who chose intelligence gathering over battlefield glory. The communication array crackled to life as she established connections to both human and Zephyrian command frequencies. On the central screen, Administrator Quinn Morix appeared, his usually composed features etched with desperation. Ambassador Sterling, we need immediate evacuation of all diplomatic personnel. The station's reactor is showing critical instabilities. How long do we have? Jack asked. 20 minutes before catastrophic failure, Morix replied. Maybe less if they target the reactor directly again. Zara's head snapped up from her console. They're not trying to destroy the station, she said with sudden understanding. They want it intact. What do you mean? Jack moved to her side, watching her pull up raid patterns and attack vectors. Look at their targeting solutions, she said, highlighting enemy positions on the tactical display. They're crippling our defenses, not obliterating them. The Korathi want to capture Nexus Station and everyone on it. The implication struck Jack like a physical blow. Political prisoners. They'd have hostages from a dozen worlds, including both our delegations. The perfect way to restart the war, Zara confirmed grimly. Execute human diplomats on public broadcast, blame Zephyrian military incompetence, then disappear into the outer systems. Another massive impact shook the station. Through the command center's reinforced viewport, Jack could see one of Corex's cruisers listing badly. Atmosphere streaming from hull breaches like glittering tears. There has to be something we can do, he said. Zara's expression shifted, calculation replacing despair. She pulled up station schematics alongside radar movement patterns, her strategic mind processing variables at inhuman speed. The maintenance tunnels, she said suddenly. They run directly beneath the main docking bays, where the raiders will attempt boarding. You want to set charges? Better. Her smile held predatory satisfaction. I want to vent those sections to space while their assault shuttles are docked, but it requires manual activation from the engineering level, and the route passes through areas already compromised by weapon damage. Jack studied the schematic, seeing the path highlighted in dangerous red. Radiation exposure, potential decompression, and likely combat with Korathi boarding parties. That's a suicide run. For one person, yes, Zara agreed, but not for two people working together. She turned to face him fully, her starlight eyes reflecting depths of emotion that military training couldn't conceal. Jack, I need you to understand something. My mission was to evaluate whether humans deserve to survive. But somewhere between your kindness and your courage, the mission changed. Changed how? I stopped asking whether humans deserve to live, she said softly. I started asking whether I deserve to live without you. The confession hung between them like a bridge across species barriers. Jack reached for her, his hands finding the graceful curve of her shoulders, feeling alien warmth through tactical fabric. Zara, I have to make a choice, she continued, between duty to the Empire and saving the man who showed me what honor actually means. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Emergency lights flickered as power systems strained beyond their limits. Through the comm channels, they could hear reports of Korathi boarding parties cutting through outer hull sections. If we do this, Jack said carefully, there's no going back. You'll be branded a traitor by your own people. I was branded a traitor the moment I let you kiss me, she replied with bitter honesty. The moment I realized I cared more about saving you than preserving Zephyrian superiority. She stepped closer, her body pressing against his with desperate urgency. When she kissed him this time, there was nothing calculated about it. Only raw need and the terrifying vulnerability of absolute trust. Help me save everyone, she whispered against his lips, even if it costs us everything. Jack's answer came without hesitation. Show me what needs to be done. They moved through the station's damaged sections like dancers performing a deadly choreography. Zara's tactical training kept them alive, while Jack's diplomatic knowledge opened secured passages. The maintenance tunnels were a nightmare of twisted metal and sparking conduits, but they pressed forward with shared determination. There, Zara pointed to a control junction surrounded by emergency barriers. Manual activation of the docking bay atmospheric systems. Through the deck plating, they could hear the distinctive whine of Korathi assault shuttles latching onto docking ports. Jack began working on the control seals while Zara established overwatch, her weapon trained on the tunnel entrance. Movement, she said tersely. 3 contacts moving fast. The first Korathi raider appeared around the bend like a nightmare given form. Chitinous armor over insectoid features, compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting with predatory hunger. Zara's weapon discharged with lethal precision, but 2 more raiders pressed forward. Jack, now, she shouted, laying down covering fire. He yanked the manual release, feeling ancient mechanisms respond with groaning reluctance. Throughout the station, atmospheric processors reverse their flow, turning life-giving air into the vacuum of space. The docking bays explosively decompressed, taking half the Korathi assault force with them. The remaining raiders found themselves trapped between the station's defenders and the infinite cold of space. But victory came with a price. Zara cried out as a raider's energy weapon found its mark, alien blood spattering the tunnel walls. Jack caught her as she fell, his diplomatic training useless against the reality of her pain. "Did we do it?" she asked, her voice weak but determined. Through his communicator, Dylan's excited voice confirmed their success. "Ambassador, the raider ships are retreating! General Korax is calling it a complete victory." Jack held Zara close, feeling her alien heartbeat gradually steadying. Around them, the station's emergency systems began restoring normal operations. But he knew nothing would ever be normal again. "We did it," he said, his lips brushing her temple. "We saved them all." "Good," she whispered, her smile radiant despite her injuries. "Now, we just have to survive the consequences." The medical bay's sterile lighting softened the purple hues of Zara's skin as regeneration units worked to heal her injuries. Jack sat beside her recovery pod, his fingers intertwined with hers through the transparent barrier. 3 days had passed since their desperate gambit saved Nexus Station, and the political landscape had shifted like tectonic plates. "The Zephyrian High Command wants to see you," Jack said, watching her eyes flutter open. "Today." "I know," she replied, her voice stronger than it had been since the tunnel fight. "General Korax has been broadcasting my heroic actions across the Empire. Apparently, tactical brilliance excuses treason when it saves military lives." The medical unit chimed completion, its barriers retracting with hydraulic whispers. Zara sat up slowly, testing her mobility. The energy weapon's burn had left a faint scar along her shoulder, a permanent reminder of the choice she'd made. "And the humans?" she asked. Jack helped her to her feet, marveling at how natural the gesture felt despite their species' differences. "Ambassador Cross has been surprisingly diplomatic about our unauthorized activities. Dylan thinks it's because we prevented an interstellar incident that would have destroyed her career." "Smart woman," Zara said with wry amusement. "What about the negotiations?" "That's more complicated." They walked together through the station's corridors, now bustling with repair crews and diplomatic staff preparing for the resumption of talks. Jack noticed how other beings watched them. Some with curiosity, others with barely concealed disapproval, but none with the open hostility that had existed before the attack. "The Korathi raid changed everything," Jack explained. "Both our species faced a common enemy. The military councils on both sides are pushing for alliance rather than mere peace treaties." "Military alliances born from shared combat," Zara mused. "My people understand that language." They entered the main conference chamber, where the formal proceedings would conclude. The space had been reconfigured, with human and Zephyrian delegations sharing integrated seating rather than facing each other across a divide. At the center table, documents waited bearing seals from Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld. Administrator Quinn Morix called the session to order, his usual bureaucratic demeanor replaced by something approaching warmth. "We gather to formalize agreements born from courage and sealed with blood," he announced. "The Terran-Zephyrian Mutual Defense Compact represents more than political necessity. It represents proof that different species can choose cooperation over conflict." General Korax stood first, his military bearing unchanged but his words carrying new respect. "Strategic Analyst Voss," he said formally, "the Empire acknowledges your service in preserving both Zephyrian lives and diplomatic progress. Your tactical innovations during the crisis have earned you promotion to Strategic Command." Zara inclined her head gracefully. "I accept the honor, General, but request assignment to the new Joint Operations Division." "Joint Operations?" Ambassador Cross looked intrigued. "A combined human-Zephyrian unit," Zara explained, "designed to counter threats like the Korathi raiders. We proved that our species work effectively together under pressure." Jack felt his heart rate accelerate as he realized what she was proposing. "You want to formalize our partnership." "Professional partnership," she corrected with a subtle smile. "Though I suspect our personal relationship might benefit from continued collaboration." The signing ceremony proceeded with unprecedented cooperation. Where previous negotiations had dragged for months, the alliance agreement was completed in hours. The Korathi attack had stripped away pretense and revealed fundamental compatibility between human adaptability and Zephyrian strategic thinking. As delegates celebrated with champagne and Zephyrian ceremonial wine, Jack found himself alone with Zara on the observation deck, where their first honest conversation had begun. The nebula outside painted space in swirling purples and golds, a cosmic backdrop for the moment that would define both their futures. So, he said, leaning against the viewport beside her. Strategic command with joint operations assignment. That's quite a career advancement for a disgraced analyst. The Empire values results over protocol, she replied. Besides, someone needs to keep you diplomatic types from getting killed during the next crisis. You think there'll be a next crisis? Zara's laugh held notes of anticipation rather than worry. Jack, we just proved that humans and Zephyrians can work together effectively. Half the galaxy is going to see that as either an opportunity or a threat. She turned to face him, her starlight eyes reflecting the cosmic vista beyond the transparistile. Are you prepared for that kind of future? Working together might mean years in space, dangerous missions, political complications that make this week look simple. Jack considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, his greatest concern had been memorizing diplomatic protocols for trade negotiations. Now he was contemplating a career that would blend diplomacy with intelligence work, peaceful solutions with tactical operations. Will you be there? He asked. Every step, she promised. Then I'm prepared for anything. She moved closer, her hand finding his chest over his heart. Even for this? Her kiss tasted like starfire and promises, alien warmth mixing with human passion in a combination that felt both exotic and perfectly natural. When they broke apart, Jack could see their reflection in the viewport. 2 figures from different worlds, outlined against infinity. I have a confession, Zara said softly. When I first saw you give your shoes to a barefoot stranger, I thought it was calculated kindness designed to impress observers. And now? Now I understand that some acts of compassion are too spontaneous to be anything but genuine, she said. That's what convinced me humans were worth saving. Jack pulled her closer, feeling the steady rhythm of her alien heartbeat against his chest. I have a confession too. Oh? When I gave you my shoes, I wasn't thinking about diplomacy or species relations or political implications, he admitted. I was thinking about a beautiful woman who was cold and needed help. Just like that? Just like that. She smiled, the expression transforming her features from merely beautiful to radiant. Your species continues to surprise me, Ambassador Sterling. Good, he replied, claiming another kiss. I'd hate to become predictable. Through the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns while a space station celebrated the birth of an unprecedented alliance. In the observation deck's intimate bubble of atmosphere and warmth, 2 beings from different worlds discovered that some boundaries existed only to be crossed. The future stretched before them like unexplored space, full of dangers and wonders, challenges and opportunities. But whatever came next, they would face it together, proving that love could indeed bridge the gap between species and transform enemies into allies. Jack's shoes still fit her perfectly,